Welcome to my channel. Subscribe and enjoy daily stories about cheating, revenge, and relationship advice. The storm outside seemed determined to echo the chaos inside our home. Rain hammered against the windows with an urgency that matched the tension in our living room. The room, usually a haven of warmth and calm, felt cold and unforgiving tonight. The furniture, once a source of comfort, now seemed to mock us with its normalcy. Sarah was standing near the fireplace, her hands wringing a tissue so tightly it looked like it might disintegrate at any moment. Her eyes were red and puffy, but there was a glimmer of defiance in them that made me even more furious. I was pacing, my mind racing with thoughts of betrayal and hurt. "John, please," Sarah's voice cracked as she tried to bridge the chasm between us. "This isn't what I wanted. I made a terrible mistake, but we can get through this. I swear I still love you." I stopped pacing and faced her, my face set in a mask of cold resolve. "A mistake, Sarah? That's what you call this? Sleeping with someone else, someone you knew was a threat to us, and now you think we can just forget it and move on?" Sarah took a step toward me, her hands reaching out as if to pull me closer, but I stepped back, my eyes hardening. "I'm not asking you to forget. I'm asking you to give us a chance to fix things. Please." "You think a chance is all it takes?" I asked, my voice icy. "You don't get to ask for forgiveness just because you're sorry now. The damage is done, and it's not something that can be swept under the rug." "John, I know it's a lot to ask," she said, her voice trembling. "But if you could just what?" I cut her off, my anger flaring. "What could you possibly say that would make this right? You've shattered everything we've built together." Her eyes filled with tears, and she took a deep breath as if steeling herself for something. I don't know what else to say. Just please, don't end us like this. There's more to this than just my mistake." I crossed my arms, my frustration palpable. "If you think this marriage is worth saving, then go to him. Visit Alex in the hospital. Maybe seeing him in his condition will give you some perspective on what you've done." Sarah's eyes widened in shock and confusion. "Alex is in the hospital? What happened?" I allowed myself a small, cold smile. "He's been in a serious car accident. I witnessed it, though I'm sure you'll find that out soon enough. If you're really committed to fixing this, you should start by facing the consequences of your actions." She shook her head, her face a mask of anguish. "John, I need to see him. I need to understand, why? I repeated, the bitterness in my voice unmistakable. "Sarah, you should already know the why. But if you really need answers, then you can find them at the hospital. I'm sure Alex will have plenty to say about what happened." Sarah's shoulders slumped as she took in the gravity of my words. "I'm going to see him," she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I need you to know that this isn't over. We can still fix things." "I hope you find what you're looking for," I said as I turned away, leaving her standing there with nothing but the storm outside to keep her company. Sarah's departure was almost silent, the soft thud of the front door closing behind her barely audible over the storm's rage. I stood by the window, watching her drive away, a mix of satisfaction and dread coiling in my chest. The truth was out, and now the real consequences were about to unfold. I sank into the armchair by the fireplace, the crackle of the flames providing a stark contrast to the cold storm outside. The rain lashed against the window panes, each drop seeming to carry the weight of the secrets that had been exposed. My mind replayed the scene of the accident, the screech of tires, the blinding flash of metal against metal, and the crumpled wreckage of Alex's car. It had all happened so quickly, and yet every detail was burned into my memory. I picked up my phone and dialed the number of the private investigator, Mark, who had been tailing Alex. His voice, gruff but efficient, came through the line almost immediately. "Mark," I said, trying to keep my tone steady, "what's the latest on Alex's condition?" "Hey, John," Mark replied, his voice carrying a note of weariness. "Alex is in bad shape. Severe head trauma, broken ribs, he's barely clinging to life." "Good," I said, the word tasting bitter on my tongue. "And And the car? Have they figured out what caused the accident? Yeah, Mark said, sounding wary. They've noted brake tampering. It's a mess, John. You should know, the police are all over it. They're treating it like a potential criminal case. I leaned back in my chair, letting out a slow breath. Perfect. Keep me updated on any new developments. And remember, this stays between us. Understood, Mark said before ending the call. The image of Sarah's distressed face was now replaced by the vision of Alex in a hospital bed, struggling for his life. I knew that Sarah would be devastated, but there was something almost poetic in seeing her face the fallout of her choices. She wanted to repair our marriage, but first, she had to confront the wreckage she had helped create. I didn't have to wait long for the storm to blow over. A short while later, I received a call from Sarah. Her voice was strained and on the verge of breaking. John, I'm at the hospital, she said, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Alex, he's in really bad shape. I didn't expect to see him like this. I'm so sorry, John. I never thought. Save your apologies, I cut in, my voice flat. You wanted to fix things. This is part of it. Seeing Alex like this is a consequence of your actions. Maybe it will finally hit you just how serious this is. But, John, this isn't what I wanted. Sarah cried. I just needed to understand. I didn't mean for things to get so out of control. You should have thought about that before you made the choices you did, I said, my patience wearing thin. Just remember, the path you chose has real consequences. Don't forget that. I ended the call, leaving Sarah with her emotions and the stark reality of Alex's condition. I leaned back in my chair, the warmth of the fire failing to reach the cold knot of satisfaction and regret in my chest. The pieces were in motion, and no matter how this played out, there was no turning back. The sterile brightness of the hospital corridor was a jarring contrast to the chaos Sarah felt inside. After checking in with the front desk, she made her way to Alex's room, her heart pounding with a mixture of guilt and dread. The hallway was eerily quiet, punctuated only by the distant beeping of medical equipment. As Sarah approached Alex's room, she saw Detective Blake standing outside the door, his imposing figure barely concealed by the thin veil of privacy. He looked up as she neared, his sharp eyes scrutinizing her every move. Ms. Carter. Detective Blake's voice was calm but carried an edge of authority. I'm Detective Blake. I need to ask you a few questions regarding the accident involving Mr. Hudson. Sarah's hand trembled as she adjusted her grip on the bouquet of wilted flowers she had brought for Alex. Detective, I don't understand. I'm here to see Alex. What do you need to know? Blake's expression remained impassive. I'm aware you're here to see Mr. Hudson, but we need to ask everyone involved some questions. It's been reported that there was tampering with Mr. Hudson's car brakes. Given your connection to him, we need to clarify a few things. Sarah's face went pale. Tampering? I don't know anything about that. I just came here to see him. Detective Blake's eyes narrowed slightly. It's come to our attention that there might be more to your involvement than you're letting on. Can you explain why you were so eager to visit Mr. Hudson right after the accident was reported? Sarah swallowed hard, her throat feeling tight. I didn't know about the tampering. I only found out when I arrived here. I've been having a hard time processing everything. Blake studied her for a moment, then nodded. We're going to need you to come with me for a formal interview. It's standard procedure, especially given the circumstances. Sarah's eyes filled with tears, but she nodded, her voice barely a whisper. Okay. I understand. As Sarah was led away by Blake, I arrived at the hospital, my heart pounding with anticipation. I had prepared a dossier for the detective, documenting Sarah's affair, our financial issues, and a pattern of deceit that painted a damning picture. I approached Detective Blake, who was waiting outside Alex's room, a look of grim determination on his face. Detective Blake, I said, offering him a file. I have some information that might be relevant to your investigation. Blake glanced at the file and took it from me. What's this? Evidence, I said calmly. Evidence showing that Sarah had motive and opportunity. It's not just the affair, there's a whole web of deceit here. I think you'll find it informative. Blake skimmed through the file, his eyes narrowing as he absorbed the contents. This is quite a lot to take in. I'll review it thoroughly. Do what you need to, I said, keeping my tone even. But don't let her manipulate the situation. The truth needs to come out. As Blake took the file and walked away to continue his investigation, I could only watch, knowing that the storm I had set in motion was far from over. The confrontation between Sarah and the detective was just the beginning. The walls were closing in, and the truth was about to be laid bare. The days following Sarah's interrogation were a whirlwind of legal turmoil and escalating drama. The storm outside had passed, leaving behind a semblance of calm, but inside the courtroom, the atmosphere was anything but serene. The walls were closing in on Sarah and me, and the repercussions of our actions were starting to unravel in ways neither of us had anticipated. Sarah and I sat in separate rows, the weight of the courtroom's gaze heavy on both our shoulders. I glanced at her, seeing her face lined with worry and regret. Across the room, Detective Blake was ready to present his case, the evidence meticulously laid out to showcase the gravity of our situation. The judge entered, and the proceedings began. Detective Blake was the first to testify, presenting the damning evidence that had emerged from his investigation. The documents and recordings painted a clear picture of Sarah's involvement, revealing her desperate measures to cover up the affair and the tampering with Alex's car brakes. Sarah's lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman named Karen, tried to mount a defense, arguing that Sarah's actions were driven by fear and desperation rather than malice. Despite her efforts, the evidence seemed overwhelmingly stacked against Sarah. I leaned back in my seat, a sense of grim satisfaction settling over me. The private investigator I had hired, Mark, was called to the stand next. His testimony was crucial, revealing the intricate details of Sarah's plans and the financial desperation that had driven her to take such drastic actions. Mr. Mark, Karen began, her tone cutting through the tension. Can you tell the court how you became involved in this case? Mark adjusted his glasses and cleared his throat. I was hired by John Carter to keep an eye on Alex Hudson due to concerns about his activities and his impact on John's marriage. I provided John with regular updates on Alex's whereabouts. And were you aware of any plans to tamper with Mr. Hudson's car? Karen pressed. Mark hesitated for a moment, then shook his head. No, I was not directly involved in the tampering. However, I did relay information that led to the realization of Sarah Carter's financial difficulties and her connection to Alex. Karen nodded, turning her attention to Sarah. Mrs. Carter, how do you respond to the allegations that you were involved in tampering with Mr. Hudson's car brakes? Sarah's voice wavered as she took the stand. I didn't intend for any of this to happen. Yes, I was desperate and made terrible choices. But I never meant for Alex to be hurt. I was afraid for our future and made a mistake in judgment. Blake, watching from the sidelines, spoke up. Mrs. Carter, it's clear from the evidence that your actions were more than just a mistake. The brake tampering was premeditated, and you hired someone to carry it out. This isn't just about a personal mistake, it's a criminal act. Sarah's face crumpled as she faced the harsh reality of her situation. I understand that now. I was driven by fear, but I see that it was wrong. I'm so sorry for everything. As the courtroom waited for the final verdict, the tension was palpable. The charges against Sarah, attempted murder, were serious, and the evidence presented was compelling. I found myself reflecting on the choices that had led us to this point. The intricate web of deceit and betrayal had ensnared us both, leaving us facing the harsh consequences of our actions. In a twist no one had expected, Detective Blake called Mark back to the stand for a brief follow-up. Mr. Mark, were you aware of any involvement beyond what you've already testified? Mark shifted uncomfortably. There were some communications that suggested more was going on. It seems there was manipulation from both sides, including from John Carter himself. Blake nodded gravely. Thank you, Mr. Mark. I believe this sheds light on the broader scope of the situation. The courtroom buzzed with murmurs as the final revelations came to light. The private investigator had been playing both sides, manipulating the situation for his own gain. This revelation added a new layer of complexity to the case, implicating me in the conspiracy and assault charges. As Sarah and I were led away in handcuffs, our lives irreversibly changed, the reality of our situation sank in. We had both been caught in a dangerous and complex scheme, and the fallout had left us facing legal consequences that would forever alter our futures.